It started on a Thursday, a perfectly boring Thursday that had no right to become the circus it turned into. I was standing on my back patio sipping lukewarm lemonade, staring at my half-dead grass when I decided, today's the day. The pool had been sitting there for 3 years, collecting leaves, dead bugs, and possibly 1 or 2 missing flip-flops. It was a faded turquoise disaster, the kind of thing HGTV hosts point at dramatically before saying, "This has potential." Except, I didn't want potential. I wanted it gone. So I pulled out the pump, grabbed a hose, and started draining the thing. I had no master plan beyond get the water out. I figured maybe I'd fill it with gravel later, maybe turn it into a sunken fire pit, or, if the mood struck, install a trampoline. But before the water level even dropped a foot, my phone buzzed. "Hey, your neighbor Karen's pacing by your fence." That was my friend and next-door neighbor Tony. He sounded both amused and alarmed, like someone narrating a wildlife documentary. "Already?" I said. "I just started the pump." "Yeah," Tony replied. "She's got that HOA binder again, it's bad." The binder was legendary. Black, 3 inches thick, labeled HOA Compliance and Community Standards in Comic Sans, which somehow made it more threatening. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, I heard clack, 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 the unmistakable sound of Karen's wedge sandals of authority. She appeared through the side gate without knocking. "You can't just do that!" she barked, pointing at the pool as if I'd set it on fire. "Do what?" I asked innocently. "Drain your pool! It's against Section 14B of the Water Conservation Guidelines." I blinked. "You mean the same guidelines that say I can't have a fountain, bird bath, or sprinkler system?" "Exactly," she said, clearly proud of her grasp of bureaucracy. "So," I said, gesturing to the murky water, "I'm actually conserving water by not letting this mosquito resort exist." She froze. "That's not the point." Of course it wasn't. Karen never had a point. She had paperwork. By that evening, the pool was half empty, and I was half done dealing with her. I even put up a polite sign near the fence. "Pool under construction. Please do not complain to the HOA. Thank you." It didn't work. The next morning, I woke up to the distant sound of sirens. I stepped onto my patio, squinting against the morning sun. Sure enough, a police cruiser was parked out front. 2 officers stood talking to, who else? Karen, who looked like she'd just stopped an international crime ring. I heard one officer say, "Ma'am, draining your own pool isn't illegal." Karen's face twisted like she'd just tasted vinegar. "It's unsafe. There's open water. A child could fall in." The officer glanced at my yard. Completely fenced, locked gate, no kids in sight. "It's a hole in the ground, ma'am. A hazardous hole in the ground." At this point, I couldn't resist. I walked up, coffee mug in hand, and said, "Morning, officers. Would you like to inspect my dangerous hole?" One of them snorted, trying not to laugh. The other cleared his throat. "Sir, we just got a call about, pool drainage issues." "Yep," I said. "Trying to keep mosquitoes from organizing a union." Karen gasped. "This man has no respect for community regulations." "Ma'am," said the officer gently, "community regulations aren't law." You could almost hear the gears in her head seize up. When the police left, and with visible relief, Karen stood there fuming. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I hope not," I said cheerfully. "I'm thinking of building a koi pond next." She stomped off, muttering something about escalating to the board. By sunset, the pool was drained, the floor crusted with leaves and one sad plastic flamingo. I stood on the edge, surveying my accomplishment like a Roman emperor overlooking conquered territory. Tony wandered over, holding 2 beers. "Congratulations," he said. "You've single-handedly declared war on the HOA." "Eh?" I said. "It was bound to happen eventually." He clinked bottles with me. "So what are you going to do with it now?" "I was thinking," I said slowly, "giant sandbox, maybe a mini putting green, or an underground tiki bar." Tony grinned. "Do it. Give Karen a reason to buy binoculars." We laughed. But the thing about laughing at Karen is, it's like laughing at a thunderstorm. You don't realize how much power she has until she's right above you, because by the next week, things were about to get way weirder. Karen-S version of not over turned out to mean something closer to launching a full-scale neighborhood inquisition. It started with flyers, not digital posts, not a polite email, actual printed flyers. I found one taped to my mailbox the next morning. Attention residents. A homeowner has drained his pool in violation of HOA Section 14B. Standing water, debris, and unsightly conditions threaten our community's image. Please report all similar behavior to HOA Compliance Chair Karen H. immediately. She even used clip art of a lifeguard whistle and a red triangle with an exclamation point. By noon, half the neighborhood had them. By evening, Tony had stolen 3 just to make a dartboard. I figured it would blow over, until I got an email titled Mandatory Emergency HO Meeting. Great. The meeting was held in the clubhouse, which smelled faintly of potpourri and passive aggression. Everyone was there, retirees who lived for gossip, parents who'd rather be anywhere else, and Karen at the front table with her sacred binder, flanked by 2 other board members who looked like they regretted being there. When it was my turn to speak, Karen's eyes gleamed like a prosecutor preparing for closing arguments. "Mr. Miller," she said, drawing out my name as if announcing a villain. "Do you understand the gravity of your actions?" "Pretty sure I just drained some water," I said. "You have altered the aesthetic integrity of this community," she declared. Tony coughed loudly. "By removing a swamp?" Karen glared at him. "There are rules for a reason." I leaned back. "Out of curiosity, which rule says I can't fix my own pool?" She flipped through her binder. "Section 14B, Maintenance and Landscaping Alterations." "Let's read that, shall we?" I said, walking up and reading over her shoulder. "No major alterations to landscaping, structural features, or water features without prior board approval." Okay, but it also says, routine maintenance does not require prior notice. Draining a pool is maintenance. Karen froze. Her co-members looked like they wanted to evaporate. "So," I said brightly, "I'm good?" She snapped the binder shut. "For now." The crowd murmured. I swear I saw someone fist pump in the back. As I left, Karen hissed under her breath. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but at least my pool won't breed mosquitoes while I do." The next morning, I woke to the sound of construction. Not mine, hers. Karen was putting up a privacy fence, on her side of the property line, but high enough that it looked like a mini fortress. Beige vinyl panels, 8 feet tall, with little decorative caps on top like she was crowning herself Queen of Suburbia. Tony texted, "Dude, did she just build a Berlin Wall between your yards?" "Pretty much." I stood there watching the workers hammer away. When they finished, I applauded. "Nice fence," I called. "Trying to keep the paparazzi out?" Karen didn't answer. Fine, I thought. 2 can play this game. By Saturday, I'd filled the empty pool with something better. Giant inflatable pool toys. Flamingos, sharks, unicorns, the works. It looked like a carnival in a crater. I even added a beach umbrella and a speaker that looped tropical steel drum music all afternoon. Tony came over and whistled. She's gonna combust when she sees this. Right on cue, there was shouting from behind the fence. "What is that noise?" I yelled back. "Maintenance decor!" There was a pause, then the sound of her gate slamming. 2 minutes later, she was at my fence again, binder in hand. "You can't do this." "Sure I can," I said. "It's not a pool anymore. It's a decorative dry installation." She blinked. "That's not a thing." "Is now," I said. Tony was laughing so hard he nearly dropped his drink. That night, I thought the battle might finally cool off. I was wrong. Sunday morning, my doorbell rang. 2 county code enforcement officers stood there looking tired. "Sir," one said, "we got a report about an unregistered amusement structure." I pointed toward the backyard. "That?" They peered through the gate. Dozens of inflatable animals bobbed gently in the empty pool shell, lit by fairy lights. The older officer sighed. Sir, I'm not sure this even violates anything. Awesome, I said. Just maybe keep the music down after 10. Karen was lurking at her window, binoculars in hand. When the officers left without writing me up, I waved. She shut the blinds so fast they clattered. That should have been the end, but Karen never quit mid-meltdown. A few days later, a certified letter arrived. Notice of community infraction. Your property has been flagged for visual disharmony and potential safety violations. Immediate remediation is required. I couldn't help laughing at visual disharmony. It sounded like something from a yoga studio lawsuit. Tony said, "What are you going to do now?" "Oh," I said, "I've got ideas." Because if Karen wanted disharmony, I was about to give her a symphony. I'll admit, I spent a full day just brainstorming the most gloriously un-HOA-approved thing I could do with a dry swimming pool. My original goal was peace and quiet, but at this point, it was about art. Tony came over with pizza and beer, looked down into the empty pool now full of beach inflatables and said, "All right, Picasso, what's the next move?" I grinned. 2 words, neighborhood event. He nearly choked on his slice. "You're not..." "Oh, I absolutely am." By Saturday morning, my front yard had a handmade sign that said, "Welcome to the Great Suburban Sandbox Festival. Buy OB, bring your own beach ball." I'd ordered 2 tons of sand from a landscaping company. When the dump truck arrived, the driver stared at the pool, then at me. "You sure you want to fill that?" "Not fill it," I said. "Transform it." It took all day, but by sunset, my drained pool had become a backyard beach, complete with tiki torches, a cooler stand, a hammock, and speakers softly playing Jimmy Buffett. Tony dubbed it Club Poolless. We invited a few friends, then a few more. Soon, the neighborhood kids were roasting marshmallows, people were laughing, and someone brought a mini karaoke machine. It was perfect, until, inevitably, Karen showed up. She appeared at the fence like an apparition from a tax audit, clutching her binder and shaking with the fury of 1,000 unsent complaint emails. "This is not a sanctioned event," she shrieked. "Neither was your fence," I said. Her eyes bulged. "You're violating at least 6 ordinances." Tony leaned over. "Name one." Karen flipped through her binder so fast she nearly ripped a page out. "Noise, unauthorized landscaping, improper use of an aquatic structure." "Improper use?" I said, mock gasping. "Karen, I'm shocked. It is 2025. We don't shame people for improper use of aquatic structures anymore." Someone at the party clapped. Karen glared, red-faced. "This isn't funny. You're making a mockery of the HOA." "Karen," I said kindly, "the HOA made a mockery of itself the day they banned garden gnomes for being emotionally distracting." The crowd erupted with laughter. That's when Karen snapped. She stomped off, muttering something about calling Channel 9. We didn't believe her, until a local news van actually rolled up the next afternoon. I was grilling hot dogs in my new sandpit when the reporter approached. "We've been told there's a dispute over a beach?" "Yup," I said cheerfully. "I drained my pool, made a community space, and now I'm apparently public enemy number 1. Karen stormed over mid-interview, waving her binder. "He's violating regulations and endangering property values." The reporter blinked. "Ma'am, it looks like a sandbox." "It's chaos," Karen cried. "This used to be a respectable neighborhood." The camera panned around. Half the neighborhood was there, roasting marshmallows, kids playing volleyball in the sand, music in the background. It looked more like a block party than a crime scene. The reporter smiled. "Well, looks like everyone's having fun." Karen sputtered like a tea kettle. "This is not over." And that's when Tony, standing behind her, shouted, "Smile for the camera, Karen." The next day, the story hit social media. The headline read, "Local HOA member melts down over backyard beach party." Within hours, it had thousands of views. People were commenting things like, "Team Beach Guy. Let him live his tropical dream. Karen's gonna file a noise complaint on the ocean next." I figured that would be the end. Public embarrassment usually tames even the fiercest HOA zealot. But no. Karen doubled down. 2 days later, I came home to find a massive orange notice taped to my front door. Cease and desist notice. Unapproved structural modification. Underneath, a handwritten note. Remove the sand within 48 hours or face fines. I took a deep breath. Then I smiled. Because if there's one thing you should never do, it is give a man who owns a half-empty pool and an internet connection 48 hours to comply. Tony helped me set up the next phase. We spent the night replacing half the sand with plastic balls, thousands of them, a full-on adult ball pit. When the sun rose, my backyard looked like a Chuck E. Cheese exploded. I invited the neighbors again. This time, we had a sign-up sheet for diving into adulthood regression. Karen showed up 10 minutes later, horror in her eyes. You turned it into a playground. Technically, I said, a stress relief center. That's not even a real thing. Oh, it is now, Tony said, handing her a waiver form that said, liability, none, joy, maximum. She stormed off again, and that night, the HOA president himself came by. Mr. Donaldson was a quiet man, perpetually tired, who always looked like he regretted volunteering for this unpaid nightmare. Listen, he said, rubbing his temples, you're kind of a viral sensation. People are calling this the Beach War of Oak Ridge Estates. Catchy, I said. He sighed. Karen's demanding we fine you. I'm trying not to. Appreciated. But could you at least, I don't know, tone it down? I thought about it. Then I smiled. Sure, I'll make it quieter. And technically, I did. Because the next day, I installed a giant neon sign above the pool that read, Quiet Zone, Relaxation Pit, with soft ambient whale noises playing through hidden speakers. Tony called it chaotic compliance. I called it art. Karen called the cops. Again. It was a Saturday again when the final storm hit. The Quiet Zone sign had been glowing peacefully for 3 days. The neighborhood had mostly gotten used to the distant whale sounds, and I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, the chaos had peaked. That's when the police came back. 2 cars this time, lights flashing, slow roll through the cul-de-sac. Tony texted me immediately. Incoming boss level. She's on her porch in a sun hat, filming everything. I sighed, grabbed my coffee, and went out to meet Destiny. The younger officer looked embarrassed before he even started talking. Sir, we got another call about, unauthorized public attraction. I pointed at the pool pit full of plastic balls, fairy lights twinkling above it, and soft whale songs echoing from hidden speakers. This? It's a sensory relaxation installation. Karen appeared like she'd been waiting for a cue. It's a circus. He's turned his yard into a public menace. There are strangers parking on my street. The officer rubbed his forehead. Ma'am, do you have proof he's charging admission? She blinked. Well, no, but then it's private property and not our concern. Karen sputtered. You're letting him mock the HOA. That's dereliction of duty. The officer gave her the same look you give someone explaining that clouds aren't government surveillance drones. Ma'am, please step back. When they left, again without citations, Tony and I exchanged grins. That's what, 3rd time? He said. 4th, I corrected. 5th if you count when she called animal control about the whale sounds. We laughed, but I could tell Karen wasn't done. You could feel it in the air, the hum of fury from across the fence. And I was right. The next morning, the HOA called an emergency vote. Not a meeting. An actual community-wide vote on whether to fine me into oblivion or force me to restore the pool to its original condition. I decided if this was my trial, I'd make it memorable. The clubhouse was packed. Karen sat up front, binder open like a weapon. I walked in wearing flip-flops, sunglasses, and a Hawaiian shirt that could be seen from space. Tony carried a beach umbrella behind me like a royal standard. The president sighed. All right, let's try to stay civil. Karen stood. This man has repeatedly violated our bylaws, mocked the board, and turned his property into a spectacle. We must act now before the entire neighborhood becomes I raised my hand. Fun? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Karen banged the table. This isn't funny. Neither was the gnome ban, someone muttered. The president turned to me. Mr. Miller, any defense? Sure, I said, walking up front. Here's the thing. I drained my pool because it was a hazard. I cleaned it. I repurposed it. Everything I've done has made this neighborhood more fun, more connected, and, judging by last week's barbecue, way happier. I paused. And the only person who seems upset is the one who keeps calling the cops for no reason. Gasps. A couple claps. Even one of the board members nodded slightly. Karen jumped up. He's lying. The president raised a hand. Enough. We'll vote. Ballots went around. Tony winked at me as he marked his. When the counting finished, the president looked at the results, then at Karen, then back at me. Motion to fine Mr. Miller. Fails. Majority voted no violation. The room broke into applause. Someone actually started chanting, Beach! 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 Karen's face went crimson. You're all insane! She yelled, slamming her binder shut so hard a few papers fluttered out. I quit! She stormed out, the door banging behind her. I almost felt bad. Almost. A week later, peace returned. Sort of. I rebuilt the pool, not with water, but with polished decking and built-in seating around the edges. It became the neighborhood's go-to hangout spot. Kids played there after school, families came by on weekends, and everyone joked that it was the HOA's happiest mistake. Then, one sunny afternoon, a moving truck appeared in front of Karen's house. Tony and I watched from our porches. No way, he said. Oh, it's happening, I replied. She marched around directing movers like a general in retreat. She saw us, glared and yelled, Enjoy your circus! Before slamming her car door. We waved cheerfully. We will! When the truck drove off, Tony raised his beer. To the end of an era. To the queen of the binder, I said, clinking bottles. A month later, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper. You may have won the battle, but I'll be watching. K. I laughed out loud. Tony. She mailed me a villain monologue. He grinned. Frame it. Hang it above the tiki bar. I did. And every time someone new visits the relaxation pit, I point to the framed note and tell them, that's from the founder of the HOA Drama Cinematic Universe. Things eventually settled down. The pool area became part garden, part hangout. The HOA stopped caring about visual harmony and started focusing on actual maintenance issues. Tony started selling custom t-shirts that said, keep calm and drain the pool. And every so often when the sun sets just right, I swear I can hear faint whale sounds echoing through the cul-de-sac. No one complains anymore. Because now, every time someone new moves in, they hear the story. The story about the guy who drained his pool, built a beach, fought the HOA, and out-Karened Karen herself. And they always say the same thing. Wait, that really happened? And I just smile and answer, oh yeah, and it was glorious.